Sugar Pine 7 was, for a long time, my favorite YouTube channel, and now that it's over, or at least mostly over, I feel very weird. Even though this iteration of Steven Suptic's content had only been going on since 2017, I can't deny that it's been a beacon of inspiration as well as entertainment for me in that time. I discovered this channel when it was about halfway through the first season of its flagship series, Alternative Lifestyle, and I fell in love with it instantly. I'd never really seen comedy like Sugar Pine before, but something just clicked and I couldn't stop watching. It was exactly the content I'd been craving without even knowing it.
Goodbye, my love!
There was this constant, infectious sense of passion and creativity behind everything. It felt familiar and brand new at the same time, and most importantly, it was funny. It was hilarious, and every new upload had me beyond excited. The characters were so lovable, the unique structure of the videos was consistent and innovative, and the way the show started to evolve as it went on was fascinating. If you haven't seen Alternative Lifestyle before, the basic gist is that it's a vlog series wherein the creators play exaggerated versions of themselves, supplemented by narration from Steven, and go on a series of insane adventures together throughout Los Angeles. But Sugar Pine wasn't so much about making funny vlogs as much as it was about exploring what could be done with that format, and with YouTube as a storytelling platform. Sugar Pine found this incredibly unique middle ground where it still felt like a bunch of friends just screwing around, but you could see where they were planting the seeds of their story and how it was developing over time. Crucially, it still kept that individualistic spirit that makes YouTube so special, but it was also put together with such skill and talent that it felt like there was a giant team behind it from the very beginning. Not to mention how frequently they uploaded, which was exhausting to even think about. Was the story that Sugar Pine told as ridiculous and nonsensical as their improv? Yes, but like most personalities on YouTube, the feeling of authenticity from the people making the content is the really important part. Especially in 2017, a time where corporations were starting to get a stronger foothold on this platform and new, exciting content was struggling to break through. What helped Alternative Lifestyle stand out was that it was somewhat rooted in reality. Real events would inspire events in certain episodes, while the stories the boys planned beforehand would play out alongside those events. Everything felt very loose, very malleable, keeping the series constantly unpredictable since you never really knew what was planned before and what was improvised on the spot. While later seasons, especially season 3, were more story-based, season 1 and most of season 2 are about as episodic as entertainment like this gets. Pretty much any video is a good entry point, although my recommendations would be Sugar Pine 7, the annual bi-weekly Sugar Pine 7 sleepover, and A Day in the Life of Alfredo as good places to start. Those videos in particular give the viewer a good sense of the main dynamics between the characters, the general sense of humor, and intros to recurring side characters like Andrew, Jeremy, and Parker. I really can't overstate how amazing I found season 1, mostly from a comedic perspective. It's really hard to describe why I find Sugar Pine funny or entertaining at all. It's a crapshoot, really. If you like their humor, you'll like it, and if you don't, you won't.
The last thing I wanted was for Denver, Colorado to realize I was secretly filming his whole conversation. After I hit the entire lens on the glass, I decided there was no point in hiding the camera, so I filmed their entire secret conversation.
There's a layer of detached irony to pretty much everything, even the serious parts, especially in season 2 when things got supernatural. But it wasn't just the characters and stories that felt improvisational, the entire world did. It felt like everything was thrown together as they were filming, but they never missed a beat. At the same time, the show was able to get introspective and emotional without feeling pretentious. Eventually, the introspective nature of the show ended up being its core. And because the show had started in such a recognizable, relatable, emotional place with SourceFed's cancellation and Steven just trying to find something to do, the underdog nature of the show was so palpable. You felt the highs and lows of the episodes along with the people who made them. Because of that, the victories felt significant, like when the company was bought by Rooster Teeth, or when they won the Streamy Award for show of the year. I remember freaking out along with the entire fan base when that happened. What surprised me most is how effectively leaning into drama after such a consistent and heavy focus solely on comedy paid off for the series at the end of season 1. It's why I still think of that episode as proof of YouTube's validity as an entertainment platform, because even though these guys didn't have the budget or locations of a major TV series or movie or anything like that, they still had the passion to create something on that level and the skill to pull it off. And no, this is not a spoiler. Parker was brought back in season 2 with dark magic. Also, this is not a show that requires a spoiler warning.
If you've ever witnessed a tornado destroy a home, you'll understand this. Imagine Kib's brain in 2 parts. One is the good side. It's able to successfully land a Tinder date. That's the home. Now imagine another side where his version of a date is to bring her to a boys-only sleepover and feed her chips, peanut butter, and NyQuil. That's the tornado.
The season 1 finale, Acrasia, is a masterpiece of YouTube storytelling, and even with some fantastic moments in future episodes, Sugar Pine never quite topped it. But hitting huge dramatic heights isn't what I loved so much about these videos. It was that they struck this fascinating balance between reality and fantasy, which was particularly relevant on this platform. I've always been really interested in the parasocial feelings that YouTube can foster between creators and their audiences, and how people can start to think that strangers are their friends because they're given so much insight to their personal lives. In this context, Sugar Pine obviously walked a very odd line, because what happened in the videos was clearly fake, but the motivations for so much of the events within those videos, like finding an office, building a company, hiring new employees, and eventually falling apart, were real. As a result, Sugar Pine was always engaging, because it felt like we were being brought along on the adventures of these people who felt real and authentic as often as they felt exaggerated and ridiculous. The narration was always my favorite part of the series in this regard, because it felt like Steven letting the audience in on the emotional reality behind the ridiculous comedy. I don't know how much of Alternative Lifestyle was definitively real or fake, and I don't want to know. That's the magic of it. They made it feel real even when it was clearly fake, and that's not easy on YouTube. Not only that, but the creativity behind the channel didn't stop with the show. They also produced a short horror film, The Woods, which I thought was pretty cool, if not amazing. They started to make music, all of which was a great combination of their humor and legitimately good production. Cecilia is still a song I listen to regularly. They also started producing a weekly podcast, which was a bit of a mess at times because their humor isn't very conducive to structured conversation, obviously, but getting some behind the scenes info was fun, and it never felt like anything about the illusion of the show was being broken. But despite the proven diversity of their content and comedy and the potential for so much more, it all kinda hinged on Alternative Lifestyle, and like some great stories, there came a point where it started to get a bit old. From what I can tell, season 3 is often cited as the low point of the series, and I agree to a certain extent. It's very different, and the attempts to dive fully into fictionalized, dramatic storytelling as well as doing constant bits didn't quite gel for me. The creation of Lifestyle Classic, a spin-off series that was essentially just Alternative Lifestyle without the story, really embodied this. It felt like the channel was losing sight of what it really wanted to be, and that's fine, growing pains happen. This was only like a year after they started, but it still made for a somewhat unfocused period in the show. I enjoyed the story of season 3 just fine. I enjoyed seeing the unique style of Sugar Pine applied to drama, and I really enjoyed John Redlinger, but it felt a little too outside the box at times. Despite the fantastic season finale, it felt like things were pushed a bit too far. Almost like they were
just a couple friends who got lost somewhere along the way.
Yeah, that sums it up well. Ironically, it's somewhat comparable to another Rooster Teeth property, Red vs. Blue, which started very small, then took its story in a bigger, more dramatic direction, and then lost some steam when it tried to recapture the simplicity of its origins. I don't think season 4 of Alternative Lifestyle lost a lot of steam necessarily, and going back to basics was a good idea, but I got the sense from the beginning that things had fundamentally changed. The Office, in particular the second Office, was one of the aspects that made the new era of Sugar Pine feel distinct, but not really in a good way. What was so fun about early videos is that all of Los Angeles felt like their set. You never knew where they were going to be or what was going to happen or who they would run into, but by season 4, things started to feel a little more rudimentary, a little more structured, which is the opposite of what made Sugar Pine special. I'm sad to admit that I gradually stopped watching in early 2019 because the content was starting to feel a bit tired, and given how Steven has talked about the last stretch of the channel in retrospect, it seems like it was. Alternative Lifestyle just couldn't last forever, even though it seemed like it could at the beginning because of the exciting energy it brought to the table. However, in the lead up to the channel's cancellation, the attempts to grow the audience and diversify the content started to feel, admittedly, much more forced. The reaction videos, the sketches, the crossovers, it all had a certain desperation to it, and I feel really bad about saying that because I wanted Sugar Pine to grow. I wanted them to keep doing what they loved. Except, after a certain point, it felt like they no longer loved it. And neither did I. When the confirmation of the channel's cancellation finally came through after weeks of radio silence from the creators, even though I'd long since fallen off regular viewing by that point, the channel didn't mean any less to me. Maybe it's because Sugar Pine prompted introspection in me so often through their episodes, but when I thought back over the short history of the company, I found myself feeling strangely nostalgic. While existing on that razor's edge between fiction and reality, Sugar Pine 7 let me see more than just a bunch of silly videos. I watched these strangers find friends, find love, find a family together, all rooted in this common creative passion. Even though the channel isn't going to be as active anymore, I'm still very happy that everyone's okay and can make more stuff in the future if they want to. I try to stay pretty aware of my own parasocial feelings with YouTubers, but Sugar Pine felt like this scrappy underdog fighting its way to the top so often that I got invested in that fight, and I wasn't just rooting for the fiction. Even though I know I wasn't watching reality, I was watching their story, the story of friendship becoming business, becoming stress, becoming pain. Steven's narration, giving insight to his mental state and the state of the company, started to become more relevant and hit harder and harder because when you ignore the goofy comedy, this was a real person's dream. The more information I got, whether from the show or the podcast, just made me more and more invested. I wanted this company to succeed for them. As exciting as it was to see them partner with Rooster Teeth, it was the beginning of the end because they didn't really mix with the rest of the company in terms of content, and the growth they needed just wasn't there. Their totally unique, independent nature was their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. How could you change what worked so well without losing its heart? And then the show ended the same way it began, with cancellation and an uncertain future. This cancellation felt a lot more gutting, but if Sugar Pine taught me anything, it's that we shouldn't look at this as only an ending, but rather as the potential for a new beginning. But it's very easy for me to say that because it's very easy to be optimistic when it's not your life. All I can really do is continue to support these creators because I think everyone involved in Sugar Pine was immensely talented and can change the game all over again if they find a way. A part of me wanted Alternative Lifestyle to last forever, but at the same time, I'm glad it ended before it became a more diluted, less fun version of itself. And now that it's over, I can look back on the good times. There were a lot of good times, and in watching old videos and revisiting the beginning of the show, it never gets old. Sugar Pine 7 was really special. I don't know if we'll ever get anything quite like it again, and in a weird way, I really hope we don't. So guys, those are my thoughts on the history and legacy of Sugar Pine 7, at least so far. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you liked it, feel free to give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.